And I used to teach students in New Testament survey, I would teach this. I would take this one step further. Live your life in such a way that you don't have to say, I promise I will do something. That is your yes is your yes and your no is your no. If you're having to say, I promise, or I swear, or I commit and say it too often, you're really not living your yes, yes, no, no. You've done some things, you've broken some loose agreements or some expectations. It's not working, so you're having to say, I promise, I'll do it right this time.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Here we are, Byron. Nice to have you with us. And how is Texas today?
Yeah, Texas. It doesn't compare to the Midwest, but we've had some fall weather early, so it's been really nice. Nice weather the last couple of days.
What's fall weather for Texas? Because I have no context.
Yeah, I would say the highs in the 70s and 80s and lows in the 50s and 40s during that time of year.
Nice. Well, our highs are in the 50s and 40s right now. So yeah. we don't have what you have. Well, so we're going to talk about this concept of accountability and responsibility, something that the Crucible Project teaches and delves into. And so really the first kind of question right out of the batting cage is, what is accountability? Because I think there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about it, especially in the church and the Christian world. And so we're hoping that you can kind of shed some light on it. What is accountability?
Yeah. So it can range. Right? Like you're saying, there's a lot of myths and there are ranges of accountability. For our purposes, it's really around being responsible, giving an account for choices and actions, and recognizing that I am accountable to somebody in some way based on my agreements or based on my integrity.
So you're saying that it's based accountable with other people. That's the thing that just kind of pops out. What's the context for being accountable with other people? Do you set yourself up with that? I mean, is there a group of people that you like sign a document with that says you're going to be accountable, or is it just all across the board?
You know, it could be as I hate to use the word strict, but I don't have another word coming to mind. It could be as strict as signing a document, right? But it's really around agreements. What agreement have I made with somebody? And with myself, in all honesty. Am I in integrity with myself? Am I keeping the agreement that I've made? And so it's in that vein of, am I doing what I said I would do? And am I being who I said I would be?
Yeah. What's an example of, well, two things. One, an agreement that you would have with somebody else. But then I'm really interested in this agreement that I have with myself. I want to talk about that too. But what's an example about an agreement that you might have with others? Just from personal experience.
Let's just use you and I are meeting at 7 a.m. for a call, right? Yep. And so we've agreed, and we even have it in our calendars at 7 a.m. I show up at 7:05 without telling you anything about why I'm running late. I've really broken an agreement with you because we had an agreement to meet at 7.
And so that covers a lot of scope of a lot of different things. I have to put that out there with somebody, right? I have to be in communication with somebody so that I have made this agreement with them, right? So it's a two-way street. where I've agreed to do this, they've said yes, and then the onus is on me to be accountable to that.
Right. My side of it, my responsibility is to be there at 7. I cannot control your responsibility, right? So you're responsible to be there at 7. And so the accountability piece is one of us is late without letting the other one know. And so I technically could check in with you around, hey, tell me why you were late. We had an agreement.
And do you think that happens a lot where people, make an agreement and then they don't honor the agreement, but nothing is ever said about that? I mean, it sounds like you can really build up some issues with another person. Yeah.
A lot of times people do not keep agreements and somebody is afraid to say anything about it. They just don't know how to approach it, right? And so in that process, they start withholds. There can be resentment or energy. I'm adding to what you said, but issues can come up because we didn't say anything or ask any questions. We'll just move forward and stuff it.
So that sounds a lot like potential marriage issues, obviously.
Yeah.
Is that pretty, do you find that to be a common thing in marriages?
Yeah, I believe so. I think if marriages would look at agreements and working around their agreements with each other, a lot of issues would be avoided.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So this is a huge linchpin, obviously, in relationships, the accountability, responsibility. I could see that would flow into parenting, right, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Business relationships, just a lot of different avenues that accountability and responsibility cover. Let's go back to that one thing that you said, though, that was really interesting, and I want to unpack that. Accountability to myself. What the heck does that mean?
Yeah, that is vague, and it is difficult, really, to look at. But I like the word conscious, unconscious, right?
Okay.
There's this conscious part of me that says, okay, I want to eat better. So I'm making a commitment to myself over the next 5 days to eat healthy. Then I slip, right? I go ahead and eat that bowl of ice cream that I was not going to eat, just like, oh, well, I'm going to reward myself. Well, I have not kept my commitment to myself. There's not a huge accountability piece, but it may be something I might need to talk with somebody else about. I am out of integrity with myself. I said I would eat better. I have not. And they may walk through, okay, so what do you get out of going ahead and eating the bowl of ice cream? What choice could you have made different? Helping myself stay within what I plan to do, because we shouldn't do life alone anyway. And that helps me be the person I'm supposed to be, even if it's just integrity with myself. I didn't hurt anybody. I guess I didn't hurt anybody. Really, a consequence even for that choice. If I keep that living habit, conceivably, I may die earlier and hurt some people, leave my wife, without a husband, leave my kids without a dad, that kind of thing on that healthy choice. I mean, that's extreme, but there are consequences even outside of me on my own integrity.
Yeah. And I mean, it does beg the question, can accountability to self really be done in a vacuum anyway? Right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, because how does accountability to self be maximized? If I have these things that I put out there, it's better, like it's reinforced if I do it in relationship, right? If I do it with others. Okay.
Yeah.
So even the accountability to self really ultimately is better with others.
Yeah, it is. What it does is it just helps me stay in check. And, we talked a little bit, you mentioned something around myths of accountability.
Yeah.
I believe, so first I want to frame this up. Christ's church is perfect, right? Jesus created the church, and the body of Christ is perfect. Humanity, we don't probably do church the way Jesus envisioned. Right.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
is that the bride? That's the bridegroom without blemish, right? He wants to present.
Yeah.
Church.
And so I frame that up to say this: in a lot of ways, church people have created this accountability that is a little oppressive. Did you sin today? You need to tell me what those sins are, right? And it feels a little more rules following and a little more oppressive, rather than did you keep an agreement? So that myth of how accountability looks, accountability, sometimes you say that word around somebody, they're going to bristle. They get this feeling of somebody is sticking their heavy hand on me and trying to guide me and tell me what I need to do. We're human. We want to follow God to the best of our ability, but I think that's from a fearful place sometimes. And so we make accountability this heavy hand. And that's not really what it's about. I cannot hold you accountable to anything.
Okay, and that's the fallacy, right? Of that accountability that we have kind of thrown out in the church, where other people have to be responsible for my change in behavior, right? Is that the whole point of it?
Yeah. And I can't hold you accountable to anything, but I could come alongside you and ask you some questions and see if you're open for me to help you with, whatever decisions you're making, and are they healthy and that sort of thing. And that is a more true accountability, because you may say no, and I've got to accept that. Otherwise, I'm going to damage a relationship by forcing myself on you. Right?
Yeah. And so do you think that, like, we have done a poor job of explaining accountability in the church or even in other places? And so is that one of the reasons why we kind of shirk away from wanting this whole accountability gig, because it feels oppressive, like you said?
I'm going to say that's partially, yes. I couldn't tell you how it feels to every person, but that's the way I would describe it, just that heavy hand. But that might manifest itself differently in different people on how they resist. Yeah.
That makes sense. So are there any other myths that you're aware of about accountability and kind of debunking those myths?
I think that's the main one that I notice, and I'm staying in the church vein, right? Some of the other myths are, I would say they're not necessarily myths, they're just misguided accountability. Like a manager to a subordinate, holding them accountable to something that is an assumption. I run into this a lot in the business coaching, is a manager will say, I do not know what else to do to hold my people accountable. My first question is, did you get buy-in from them in the first place?
What is buy-in? What is that?
Did you get an agreement? Here is what I'm asking you to do. Are you going to do this? I mean, that's real basic and simple. There are other ways to communicate it. Here are our task lists. Are you willing to do these? And by when? When will these be done? Then the emotion is no longer a part of the accountability process. Now they're both pointing to, we agreed, we bought in, this is what's going to happen. And you point to that, and the emotion doesn't have to come in. The frustration of the manager, say to the subordinate, hey, didn't we agree that you would take care of this by Tuesday at 9? Yes. So tell me what's going on. What happened to keep you from getting there? What choices have you made? Those kinds of questions. And they are no longer feeling attacked because you're talking about the agreement. This is outside of us, right? So,
and that sounds like parenting too. That sounds like parenting, right?
Very much so. Very much so.
Same thing.
And so that slides us into responsibility, because what we did was we had an agreement. Both people agreed this will be done by Tuesday at 9. Now they're responsible for themselves. You put the choice on them. They get to choose whether they're going to do it or not.
Right.
And now we're all pointing to the agreement and no longer attacking them personally. One of the biggest mistakes that I saw teachers make when I was in education in this realm, in this day and age, used to, when you and I were growing up, a teacher would say, this is obviously not your best work. And we would respond. We might bristle a little bit, but we would respond, yeah, you're right. In this day and age, a student's going to say, what do you mean? Why are you attacking me? Why are you attacking my character? And so the shift is this your best work? And they would say, no.
All right.
Yeah.
So it's that agreement piece, right?
Yeah.
It's getting to the point where both parties are agreeing on something, and then the onus is that's on and agreeing to who's responsible for it.
And in the realm of responsibility, I'm the boss. I'm upset that this person's not taking care of business. But the first thing I need to look at, did I make a loose agreement? Did I get a clear, yes, I will do this by Tuesday at 9? I'm avoiding a lot of unneeded emotion by setting this clear agreement with that individual. And then I can ask questions rather than, you lazy sucker, you didn't take care of this by 9 o'clock.
Yeah, the clear agreement seems like a huge piece of the accountability piece. And so it's totally okay then to ask clarifying questions to make sure that person understands what's expected, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that fits in what I call a fallacy of assumptions. We do a lot of accountability based off of assumptions. And assumptions are dangerous.
Yeah, what's an example of that you've seen in your work?
Yeah, so let's marriage. We do this off of assumptions a lot. We've been married for several years. I would just assume my wife would put her dirty clothes in the dirty clothes hamper, right? Okay,
this is too familiar. Please,
yeah.
Use another example.
Right. But I get angry because I see her socks at the end of the bed or whatever, right? But we never did really talk about, hey, can we make an agreement around what to do with our dirty clothes? And we might not say it quite that way. Can we make an agreement, this official thing? But
sure.
Hey, what are we going to do with our dirty clothes? Oh, I think I'm going to put them in the basket every time. I probably shouldn't leave them at the end of the bed, that kind of thing. So, those loose assumptions that we start getting, we let it build up and we notice it 4 or 5 times. And then all of a sudden we just throw the laundry basket at them. Say, put them in here. And that's based off of assumptions. Nobody made a clear, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But don't we get something out of making loose assumptions? Do we get anything out of it? Like, what do we get from not being clear?
Yeah. Some of it is a relief. I don't want somebody really pressing me right now. I'd rather not have to think about it. There's some relief in that. And I had a wise mentor talk about, we do not take part in any behavior unless we value and believe something. Every time I take part in a behavior, whether it's healthy, unhealthy, I actually value or believe something about that. There's something I believe or something I value. Yeah, I brush my teeth because I value and believe something. It might be hygiene. It might be I don't want to lose my teeth. It might be, man, I don't want to have bad breath. I don't want people to think badly of me. But I believe something. That's why I do it. We get something out of every behavior that we do.
Right. So like I could see where if I'm like, well, I want peace, right, at any cost. That kind of Neville Chamberlain, people can look that up, kind of thing where I don't want confrontation. I don't like confrontation. I believe that it's better to have peace, even though I'm going to continually get ticked off that my wife is putting clothes all over the floor. If I value that more, that's going to make it harder for me to confront her in a loving way. I mean, is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. There is this perception that if I just keep my mouth shut, I'll keep the peace. And we may have to have a little bit of conflict, but peace will actually be better on the other side because we've at least talked about it and we have some kind of agreement. Now my emotion no longer can be a part of it. Now, there's this other piece. Okay, we've agreed that she would put it in the basket every time.
Yeah.
And she doesn't. And I check on that. Hey, didn't we agree? So can we renegotiate this? Can we come up with a different plan that works for both of us? So there's a renegotiation that can happen. Yeah. So we can reset. Hey, let's look at this again. This isn't working. So what can we come to that's mutual? A new mutual agreement that we would hold accountability with. And again, I can't actually hold her accountable.
Right.
I can only ask, hey, would you look at the agreement and are there any choices around any of that.
So with the, like, even if you would have showed up late, you could have contacted me earlier and renegotiated the time, right? I mean, that's a renegotiation thing too?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. Yeah. Just a simple letting somebody know, hey, I am going to be 5 minutes late. As a person who wants to be as responsible as I possibly can be, even after we start 5 minutes late, I may let you know, hey, I made a choice to finish up something and it was running me over. That's why I let you know I was running late. I'm just considering you.
Right. Yeah. And that sounds more like being in integrity, right? Because a lot of this, like part of the not end game, but part of the benefit of accountability, self-accountability, being responsible is to be able to walk in the room and go, I have integrity. And integrity is what again?
Yeah, I match what I say I will do. My walk, it's a cliche, but my walk matches my talk.
Yeah. And that's a huge value that we hold in the Crucible Project, right? This integrity, walking in integrity, being accountable, being responsible, responsibility. So that's really good. Where do you see this show up? I mean, we talked a little bit about it in the context of church, but where biblically do you see this whole concept of accountability, responsibility, that integrity stuff show up biblically? Anything that pop out?
A couple of examples for me. One, and I really like the difference between biblical comparison and scriptural, right?
Yeah.
So accountability, you can't go look it up in the Bible, right? But we can sure see biblical examples of it. And the best one is just Jesus talking about your yes be yes and your no, no. And I used to teach students in New Testament survey, I would take this one step further. Live your life in such a way that you don't have to say, I promise I will do something. That is your yes is your yes and your no is your no. If you're having to say, I promise, or I swear, or I commit and say it too often, you're really not living your yes, yes, no, no. You've done some things. You've broken some loose agreements or some expectations. It's not working. So you're having to say, I promise I'll do it right this time. The other example that really came to heart for me in terms of integrity was Saul and Samuel and David and Nathan. Saul did not keep the command that I would assume he agreed to with Samuel with God, right? And he paid a huge consequence for that, right? And he still only thought of himself. He was never at a place where he was contrite, because he asked Samuel, would you at least honor me in front of the people?
Oh, sure. Kind of the surface thing, right?
Yeah.
Put on a good show.
Exactly. And so he never did really take responsibility for himself. He made excuses and all that. David, on the other hand, once he knew what he had done with Bathsheba and it really dawned on him all the choices he had made, his heart was deeply cut. He still paid the consequences, but he paid them from a place of, I've asked forgiveness. I have sinned against the Lord, not my persona of leadership. David also did something that sometimes we tend to do, which is really not taking good responsibility. He made himself a martyr a few times, like, oh, woe's me, a little too much. Instead of just saying, I did it, I'm going to do better going forward, or I'm going to commit to doing better forward, But he did a little woe's me. But I want to be careful with that, because it's a whole nother topic, but sadness is something we need to experience and grieve. And I think that's what David was doing, was grieving.
So in some senses, Saul really did not do things in integrity compared to David, which makes sense.
And he did not take responsibility. He never took responsibility.
He wanted to look good in front of others. And you did say something, when Jesus says this, let your yes be yes and no be no, it just kind of triggered something in my mind. Is part of the yes, yes, no, no thing teaching people how to say no more?
Yeah.
And this comes from my own saying yes too much, right? Over promising, under delivering kind of thing, even from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second. How do you, from an accountability, responsibility standpoint, get to the point where you're accurately assessing and being able to say not too much yes and maybe more no, or vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. First thing that really comes to mind for me is back to what do we get out of doing what we do, right?
Yeah.
And many times somebody does not want to deal with the conflict or the idea that somebody might not like my decision, might not like my no. And so I go ahead and say yes, and I pile it on. Now I've made too many agreements that I can't keep up with. I've overloaded. I've gone beyond my margins. And some of the best ways to stay in integrity is say no more. Set boundaries. Don't make some of those agreements. Take the moment to say, let me think about that. Can I get back with you? You know, I was talking with our founder, with the founder of the Crucible Project yesterday, and I asked him if he was willing to do a couple of things. He said, would you give me a couple of days and I will get back with you? I'm hesitant. I've got a lot on my plate, but let me get back with you and let you know. We can take that time, but we're afraid of what they might think of us. And so, yeah, some of the best ways to keep agreements is don't make as many.
Yes. And that's a whole nother level of self-awareness too, right? I mean, we have to be very aware of our own strengths and weaknesses, our propensities to do certain things and why we do them, and unpacking that. So that's a good thing. How does someone get to that, right? Where they become more self-aware? Like, how would I go, okay, I seem to have this problem. I say yes way too much. What would you offer as guidance and advice for somebody?
I still put it in the vein of conscious, unconscious. Are they consciously noticing the pain in their life, or the burden, or I feel like something doesn't feel right. I keep banging my head against the wall and it's not going well. Are they willing to look at it? If that person is feeling that, seek out somebody who can look in and give you some perspective of what they're at least seeing. And I think that would be the start, because again, we can't make anybody do anything. That's such I want to say a nebulous thing when you ask that, how does they've got to notice something's not right. That's that first piece of an awareness. Yeah.
Okay.
And then go find somebody, use us. We that's part of what we do, is we help you look under the hood, right?
Right.
And
right.
see what's clanking in the car. That would be the first step, I believe. Something doesn't feel right. Go find somebody who can mentor you and start asking you questions.
Well, and you're a coach for the Crucible Project, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have you had men from outside the Crucible kind of use you as a coach, even though that they've heard, like, I know that you don't have to necessarily, a person doesn't have to go through a weekend in order to use our coaching services, right? So they could contact you and set up a meeting. And what do you typically do in that first initial meeting with accountability and responsibility? How do you kind of help them see what's going on under the hood, I guess?
Yeah, I really pay attention to this taking responsibility versus blaming. A lot of times, and I do it, I still do it, look at something going on outside of me, and then I look at that as that's my problem. And so the first thing to look at to ask is, can you control? So let's just use the boss. Because I also work with this just in managers and their CEOs, right? They'll come in and give me about a 30-minute diatribe of complaint, around what their CEO is doing and how they would be better if they were in that role. Let them complain themselves out and then ask, so can you control him? Who signs the paycheck? No. Okay. So what can you do for yourself to begin to get what you're looking for? How can you approach him to make some of these changes? What can you do to chip away at what you're seeing him doing? I want them to see what can they be responsible for.
Yeah.
And some of it is their own doing. These people are actually reacting to them by the way they're doing things. And sometimes it is the only way you're going to be at peace is when you're responsible for yourself, not worrying about what everybody else is doing. Then you become the example, and change will happen when you become the example.
Why is that? Why does that happen? I've noticed that too, but why?
Yeah, it's an influence. There's an influence piece. There's a difference. You're walking differently, and people notice what is going on. Just noticing it's more than just going on a mountaintop experience somewhere and it lasts for a few weeks. You've actually been consciously working on this. Tell me about it. Or they just start responding to it. Their natural response is a little more positive. It won't be right away because change always makes people not sure of what's going on and they don't know how to react to your change. But eventually they see this as a new norm.
That's so powerful. So you were vulnerable in talking about how, you still do things that aren't that great. But what, I was just wondering, describe your own journey, Byron, in this area of accountability and responsibility and how it's impacted your life.
Yeah, I pretty much land as a 1 on the Enneagram, and that's that person who you follow the rules. You do whatever the rules are, you follow. So I've always kind of been a rules follower. Being on time was always important to me. Those are just pieces, I think, of my personality. But man, I can make excuses and I can blame and be such a victim in so many ways. It's always somebody holding me back, or it's always something keeping me from doing it, or, I can procrastinate and not finish something, but I can give you a list of reasons why I didn't finish it. It's all because of something else outside of me. So I didn't like that about myself, but I didn't know how to stop. Right.
So you were aware of it.
Sometimes I was aware of it. Sometimes I'm not. Right. There are times where I'm just I still blame other people, especially traffic. Traffic's always one of the best, right? They intentionally cut me off, that kind of thing.
And they did it to me.
They did it to me. They were the part of what my brother would call the MIS, the Mobile Irritation Squad. And they were waiting on me to pull out of the driveway, right? I realized once we started talking about accountability, what it really was and how, I am not the victim here. There are things I can't control, but I still have choices whether I want to stay in that realm of no control. And what it did is it shifts me. I still do it. I noticed it in a meeting recently. I just kind of jumped in where I shouldn't have, and that's a control piece. I felt like something's not right, okay? But it has helped me not control things in areas where I don't need to be controlling. Even that has helped me quite a bit. But I just recognized my excuses, how I was blaming. It was outside of me, people holding me back. Very helpful for me to look at this integrity, agreements, responsibility. I'm responsible for myself. And that's a scary thought we want to be careful because Christians don't like the idea of me being responsible for myself. Feels a little too new age, right?
Oh,
and
sure.
I'm totally, because we can go off the other end of the spectrum and I'm totally responsible for myself. And now I know I don't need God. And that's not true at all either.
You can be surrendering to God and open to God and have accountability and responsibility in your life. Mm-hmm. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. There are things that God has set in motion that I can't control.
Sure.
Right. So where do I fit? Where's my responsibility in the kingdom as this is happening? Right. Or there are things that God allows to happen in the course of things. So what are my choices at this moment? I think of, we're talking about biblical examples. One of the biggest biblical example that comes to me around excuses and not taking responsibility and choices was Adam standing right there with Eve while the serpent deceives her. And the word says, and she handed the fruit to her husband who was there. He didn't step up. He was passive.
Yeah.
Right. And he blames her when God says, where are you? What have you done? Well, this woman that you gave me this fruit to eat, right?
He throws her under the bus.
He does. Yeah. So yeah, there is, God gave them choices. He didn't set the serpent in motion. He gave them choices. Here's your free will. And then they made that choice. Now, what's my responsibility in that realm?
So we talked before about, being in agreement with one another, right? Coming to an agreement. So does that mean, or do we have to assume then that both people are totally aware of this process of accountability and that they know the rules of accountability as well to follow this, that they're on board with that they are kind of agreeing before they get to the agreement of how to do this thing? Or can you do accountability with somebody who may not be as aware of kind of the rules of engagement, so to speak?
Yeah, it would be good if you set out the rules of engagement beforehand, if it's possible. And that just takes some time. It's like system building so that your system runs. You got to do some front end work so that it'll run. But yeah, as a person of influence or leadership or in that role, you could do it by just pointing to the agreement, right? By getting them to a place, if you ask the right questions, is this agreeable to you? Yes. By when will this be taken care of? What you can even ask an extra question. And if it is not, what do we do? What would be the consequence? What would be the result? How would I approach you if you don't? Right? You ask those questions and you're just keeping them in the loop. Eventually they'll begin to do that as well, or they'll ask you about it. Hey, we went through that. Tell me more how you set that up, right? But if you'll get them to come up with their own consequence, with their own, how do I approach you, right? They say, well, I would like for you to ask me questions like you're doing now. Great. So when I ask you questions, are you going to be agreeable, right? It's just setting it up. And we could easily, if you wanted to, you can go into autocratic and just tell them this is how it is, and you signed on the dotted line and everything's in agreement. But that won't work well in this day and age for very long. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I can see under the auspices of business or those kind of relationships, I can see that really working well. The one area that I can't, and this is probably my own stuff, is family. It's like, what are you doing here? And so I guess that begs the whole question of and another topic for another day of leadership and what are the assumptions about that?
Yeah, in family, maybe one of the key questions to ask would be, so what are we assuming?
What are we assuming?
Yeah. What are we assuming here? Or what do you think the expectation might be? So start pointing to this out there loose agreement that, just ask those simple questions. What gets hard is because it feels like conflict. It's not, but it feels like conflict.
Yeah.
And people, the stomach starts knotting up. I just don't want to go there. I don't want to talk about that. Right. And you have to honor that. Right. If you want to keep the peace.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some pushing through some of the uncomfortability in some relationships, obviously, and that's a whole nother topic, but that's good. Did you really learn accountability and responsibility more, I guess, in crystalline form, more clearer because of your involvement in the Crucible Project?
Yeah, absolutely. It really helped shape shaped what I understood about accountability and what true accountability is and what integrity is. You know, it took me beyond the cliche of, you know, your talk matching your walk matching your talk. I like what you said, crystallized responsibility. And it didn't right away. I mean, it was this new process, this new way of looking at it. But as I've worked with many people around this, both in Crucible and outside, wow, the responsibility piece is so powerful.
This has been really, really insightful. I really appreciate you being willing to spend time with us on the podcast, and sure appreciate being in a relationship with you too. So thank you so much for coming on board and talking about accountability and responsibility, Byron.
You bet. It's been a joy. Yeah,
I can tell that it just kind of flows out of you, and it's something that you have really spent a lot of time processing, practicing, and helping others, with as well. So I appreciate that. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Hope so.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.